Hi everyone, I'm Stewart. I'm the Movember student ambassador for Heriot-Watt University, and this Movember I'm delighted to be chatting alongside Mark Beaumont.
Good to see you. Good to be in touch. We've chatted by email, but now we get a chance to call.
I know everything seems to be online via emails, no face-to-face, so that's just what happens. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark?
Yeah, so we're not living a million miles apart. I'm also in Edinburgh. My background's in big expeditions. So I graduated 15 years ago from Glasgow University. At the time, I was heavily involved in student sport myself, mainly in the ski and snowboard club, and then as VP of club sport. So heavily involved in student clubs and societies, but my career has been in big expeditions and broadcasting. So I've cycled around the world twice. I still hold that circumnavigation world record. Traveled to about 130 countries, written 5 books. You know, my life's in broadcasting and expeditions, and you can probably see on the home office wall here, you know, the memorabilia from 15 years of traveling the planet and trying to do stuff that people haven't done before. So my passion's bike riding, you know, ultra runnings, you know, all sorts of adventure sports, climbing, Arctic, you name it.
That's brilliant. And so I was diagnosed with testicular cancer back in October 2019. And I was a genuinely like a fit and healthy young guy. Didn't expect it at all. I played basketball throughout my whole life. That would surprise you because I'm only 5'6", 5'7" with shoes, so that would surprise you. And the reason I got into cycling and triathlons as well was because I felt so exhausted physically and mentally because of the diagnosis. I lost my confidence, fitness just went down the drain, and I wanted to have that something to look forward to, that something that gave me a thrill and something that made me feel like I could keep going and have that sense of endurance. So I was just wondering, do you have a reason or is there a purpose as to why you got into these long distance endurance events?
Yeah, I think we've all got sort of things that we aspire to, sort of the big dreams, but also probably things we're running away from as well. And my formative years were I was homeschooled for the first 12 years of my life, so I wasn't in the playground. I spent a huge amount of time on my own working on the farm. You know, we had a farm in very rural Scotland, and so I guess I had a great connection to the outdoors. You know, I was very comfortable in my own headspace. And when I went to high school, I found that, you know, playground dynamic pretty difficult. So you know, football and rugby and the team sports and the playground dynamics, you know, I definitely had a pretty rough ride with. So I think there was always that kid inside me that just wanted to escape to the wilds and just be in control again. And by the time I, you know, went through university and, you know, great friendships through the end of school and university, but, you know, it was challenging. So there was always that sort of kid inside me that wanted to go and push myself as an athlete. I loved, you know, figuring out what my personal best was. I loved the fact adventure sports can take you to, you know, across continents and countries. But I'd never excelled at sports in school. You know, I wasn't football team, rugby team, hockey team. I wasn't anything that classed as sporty at school. So I kind of had this sort of parallel life, which meant that I think a lot of my schoolmates are amazed that I've become a professional athlete, because it wasn't how I shone at school. And, you know, I was quite a quiet kid. So to then leave university and go, do you know what have I got to lose? Let's just go and cycle around the planet. And that opened doors. You know, I filmed it, became a BBC documentary series, and it's a bit glib to say the rest is history because it's been a lot of hard work. But those 15 years since I left uni have been, you know, a lot of really interesting projects. And there's always that kid inside me that just wants to go out and explore and push myself and share stories. And the greater good from that is partnering with great charities, with schools and organisations, and, you know, trying to give back. I remain the honorary president of Scottish Student Sports. You know, I was the rector up at Dundee University until recently. You know, I've had big partnerships with, you know, even Blue Peter and loads of organisations to try and take my journeys and sort of give young people the confidence to go out and push their ambitions. Because I wouldn't say I had a really rough ride through school, but I had an unusual journey going from being homeschooled to high school, and I think that was always sort of a bit of a fire in the belly to go out there and prove myself. And maybe when I hadn't sort of fitted in perfectly during those formative years, to then do something afterwards, which really felt like I could sort of put all my energy into. So there's a lot in that, but you're absolutely right. You do these things for very, very personal reasons.
Well, I love how you said your younger years you didn't excel in sport, yet you've cycled around the world, and now you're a big advocate for sport. So it is very much, you don't know what life throws at you, and it is just do what you feel is right for you, and it works out. It works out. So when you're preparing for these outrageous events, these endurance activities, how do you prepare yourself mentally?
I mean, the biggest part of the mental prep is very much your experience. You can't just fall out of bed and cycle around the world. You've got to have built up. I was 12 when I pedalled across Scotland. I was 15 when I took it upon myself to go from John O'Groats to Land's End. So whilst I wasn't seen as a sporty kid, I was always passionate about going out there and riding my bike and skiing, and whereas all the kids at school were trying to be getting the A team at rugby and football, I was away in the countryside riding ponies and skiing and climbing mountains. So it just wasn't what was considered as normal sport. But I was definitely passionate about sport and adventure. So by the time I graduated as a 22-year-old and went off to cycle around the world, it was still a massive jump up. Of course it was, but it didn't seem too scary for me. Like, I had the toolkit, I had the physical ability to imagine how that was possible. And then it's just about confidence. So to go back to your question, how do you have the confidence and the mindset to take on these ideas? You've got to back yourself. You've got to have that quiet confidence. You've got to be able to step out from the crowd and do things differently. And I think that's the hardest thing, especially when you're young, the peer group, the peer expectation. It's a lot easier just to do what everyone else is doing, rather than saying, I'm going to take my ideas and my skills and take it in a completely different direction, because you're likely to be judged for that. It's a lot easier to conform than to stand out. And, I always go back to that phrase, quiet confidence. It's not about ego and brag. It's just about going, do you know what? I'm going to back myself. I'm in the driving seat of my own life and my own career. I'll make mistakes along the way, but I'll never regret being in a situation because I'm the one that's chosen to put myself there. And I think that mindset piece is just so valuable, so important. You can be book smart, you can be as smart as you like, but unless you really learn to make choices and back yourself, then you end up kind of feeling like life happens to you rather than you're choosing what life looks like. So then when you end up in difficult situations, and your questions about resilience and like mental strength and whatnot, it's kind of all part of the same equation. You've taken conscious choices to be in these places. Yourself. You're accountable, and you've got a bit of a wry smile and a sense of humor when things go wrong. And I think those are such powerful tools in your armory. The ability to look back and know that your hardest moments are your fondest memories, and it's only through experience that. I think you dream of the easy life where you just sit on the sofa and watch Netflix, but I mean, if you actually did that, you'd be pretty unhappy. Human beings are at their best when they're striving, not when they've made it. We're at our best when we aspire and when we inspire others, and when we struggle. And I think through all that you learn the sort of the psychology of how to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like what you said, I think sometimes when you're faced with challenges, the most difficult part sometimes is the first step. It's almost like you see a big wall, but your goal is on the other side, and it almost feels like the first step is the biggest and the most difficult step before you hit the ground running.
The Scandinavians have got a great phrase which translates as the doorstep mile, and the doorstep mile is exactly that. As an athlete, it could be going out and training in the rain. Once you're out there, it's not too bad, but it's just getting out in the rain that's hard. But in a more sort of metaphoric sense, the doorstep mile is just saying it out loud, telling your friends you're going to do something, committing to the task. If you've got an idea, turning that idea into a reality. So that doorstep mile is a really powerful concept in terms of how you actually commit to stuff that's could, you know, more than a dream. Like, how do you turn that dream into a reality? Well, you've got to get beyond the doorstep mile. Once you go from thinking about something to doing it, it's such an exciting process. But you know, we're creatures of habit, so you need to get used to making that transition, or otherwise you're just somebody who spends your life talking about stuff that might or might not happen.
Yeah. Well, I did that the other day. So I was diagnosed on the 22nd of October, so it's coming up to the 22nd. So I announced on my Instagram, that's it, I'm going to do a half Ironman on the 22nd of this month. So now that I've said it, it's exciting, but it's scary at the same time.
Yeah, of course. Good on you.
So when you're going through the endurance events, obviously physically and mentally, it's tough going. I can imagine cycling around the world is just as tough physically and mentally. So how do you keep going? You've got started, and how do you keep going on?
I think when you're planning these big projects, you're very much inspired by, you know, the record and the outcome and what it's going to be. Whereas when you're in it, when you're actually doing the project, your mindset's very different. It's very hard when you, like, the race around the planet is an 18,000 mile journey. And, you know, I was racing 16 hours a day, every single day for 2.5 months. And it's very hard when you're in the middle of that, say in the middle of Australia, 9,000 miles in, to be thinking about Paris and the finish and the world record. That doesn't really motivate you when you're that sleep deprived. So, you know, it's kind of the fear of failure, you know, being negatively motivated, understanding how you get through. And I think that's really important to call out, because, you know, otherwise you sort of wrap it up in sort of trying to be motivated and positive when you're not. I think it's really important to call a shit day shit for your own mental health, like just to be honest about life. And I think if you wrap it up in sort of cliches and inspiration and be happy when you're not, it doesn't do anyone any favors. So I think, you know, when it's hard, just realize that that day counts, it matters. It's okay to find it tough, and it's okay to cry sometimes. So when you wrap it up in retrospect and sort of pretend that it was all easy and you're just some wonderfully motivated person, I think it's a bit disingenuous as to how hard these things are. Just know that it matters. Every day counts. You know, you keep on striving and the big picture will take care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody in particular that you go to for inspiration or advice when you feel like you need it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important to have some mentors outside of your close family. Family are amazing, but family are actually too emotionally connected to who you are and what you're doing. So, you know, if you're going through a challenge, you're going through anything in life, be it business, sport, you know, your own health, the people who are closest to you are probably going to tell you what they think you want to hear, because their happiness is so tied up with your happiness. It's really, really important to have friends, mentors who are outside of your close bubble, who you can turn to and have an honest chat to. I've got 4 or 5 people who I often turn to, have a coffee with, and just chat through business decisions or work-life stresses or big projects. And they're people who I feel have got life experience that I trust, but aren't directly emotionally and financially connected to my success. So, you know, I think friends and family are so important, but you need to be careful to have friends and mentors outside of that close group as well, just because they're less biased.
Yeah, absolutely, and that leads me on to the next point. Obviously, Movember being a charity aiming to tackle the stigma of men's health, encourage them to look after the mental and physical health. So how important is it to have a foundation like Movember that encourage guys all ages to speak up and speak out, not just if they feel like they need it, but if they think someone else that they are close to might need a shoulder to cry on. Like you said, it's fine to cry, or encourage them to look after their physical well-being as well.
It's been amazing to track the rise and the success of Movember as a foundation over the last over the last years. And the thing for me is, whilst they've got a fantastic calling card, a very, very, you know, specific campaign each November around mental health and advocacy around communication and making sure that men have a voice. This happens 365 days of the year, and what Movember have been very effective as is just shifting the culture in the UK in particular around being open about challenges, changing some of that old-fashioned sort of Britishness and stiff upper lip about our feelings and our mental health. So regardless of what you're going through, your personal journey will be entirely different to somebody else's. But we've all got physical health, we've all got mental health, and realizing that there are fantastic resources and professionals out there to help, but also just simply changing the narrative around your own journey so that it's not just for you to think and worry about. There's other people. I think the best thing often when it comes to great challenges in life is perspective. And I often talk about, the arrows. The more the arrows are going that way, the harder it is to get any sort of balance in terms of the struggles and the stresses that you're going through. So you need to get the arrows pointing that way and create impact in the world that you care about, be it family, be it community, be it work, causes that you care about. That, your fantastic work, since you were diagnosed last year, will do a huge amount of good to yourself as an individual. You're not just doing this to help others, but you're doing it to help yourself. And I think that's so powerful. And the change in the way students talk about mental health since when I was a student 15 years ago, and my recent involvements with universities in Scotland has been fantastic to see. In my role at the rector at the University of Dundee, it was one of the biggest conversations over the 3 years that I sat on the board there. And I wasn't leading that conversation. I was being educated by the student who had just that generational change of 15 years, had a different perspective, a different openness, a different ability to communicate. And, I commend that. And I think for those who are involved in student life, the organizational side of universities, to listen to the student bodies, to allow student representatives to affect policies within universities is really powerful. So I know your question was more broadly about Movember and the work that they've done, but I just think the wider conversation is an entirely positive one. And the more that we can have conversations exactly like this, the more it gives other people the quiet confidence, to go back to that phrase, to open up and chat about their own ambitions, their own dreams, but also their own struggles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think universities, there's a huge student run, the importance of mental health across all disciplines, all age groups, sexes, everything is such an important factor. So finally, will we be sporting a mustache this Movember? And do you have any styles that you'd like to replicate?
I could cheat, couldn't I? I could just shave. I've in fact, last Movember I was filming a penny farthing film, a recreation of the oldest British cycling record, and I grew an absolute belter. It was like a full Victorian, and I came home and scared my daughter. So my main concern is I'm not allowed home with a big mustache. My kids get scared of it. But joking aside, no, I'm a huge fan of the work of Movember, and it's such a fantastic talking point whenever you spot your mates out sporting a fashionable tash. So good on you. I've not committed to wearing a tash this November. I'll have to see what corporate events I've got, because of course if I'm doing an event to anyone outside of the UK, I've suddenly got to explain why I'm wearing a comedy tash.
That's true. No, Mark, thanks so much for your time. That was absolutely incredible. I'm sure everyone that will see this will be motivated to go and cycle around the world now. But as you said, one person's challenge is different to another's, and you've really inspired myself as well. So thank you again. Thanks so much.
Good on you. You're great at this communication, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.